A very warm welcome to all of you to the last session of the first day of E-India Health Summit 2013. This session is on innovative diagnostics for improved radiology. It is well known that diagnostics is the first step of treating any disease, and it's the most important element of radiology. While innovative diagnostics such as 3 Tesla, MRI, 4D imaging have revolutionized today's radiology, it is still to see what other elements of advancements have happened in this segment. For this, and to discuss on this, I would like to invite the panelists on stage. I'll start with Dr. Anand Abkari, President, Indian Radiology and Imaging Association. Please, sir, join us on the stage. I will also request Dr. Abkari to please chair the session. Now I'll invite Dr. N. Ishwar Chandra, Secretary, Indian Radiology and Imaging Association, IRIA. Dr. Harsha C. Chadaga, Senior Consultant and Head of Radiology Operations, Columbia Asia Hospitals. Dr. R. Pawar, Radiologist, CARE Hospitals. Dr. Pallai Lalita Reddy, Vice President, Central IRIA and Consultant Radiologist, Yashoda Hospital. Please join us on stage, ma'am. Now I hand over the stage to the session chair, Dr. Anand Abkari.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers of E-India Health Summit 2013 for giving us the opportunity to share our views on innovation, diagnostic in improved radiology. From the golden day of the 8th November 1895, when William Conrad Röntgen invented the X-rays, the field of radiology has taken a lead role, paving the way from diagnostic to management and interventions. Continuous advancement led to various diagnostic techniques like ultrasound, Doppler, color Doppler technology, computerized tomography, and its new generation MDCT, and now 128 and 256 slice CT scanners, magnetic resonance imaging, and its new generation of high-field Tesla magnets of 3 Tesla magnet, which was just introduced, with the advancements in diffusion-weighted imaging and perfusion, and the digital radiography, including computerized radiography and direct digital radiography. There is also improvement in the nuclear medicine along with the radiology, like SPEC, PT scan, and development in the specific coil technology and digital subtraction angiography DSA. The communication technology, which has grown by leaps and bounds, paved the way for developing further advances in radiology and teleradiology. Now the time has come not only to think about the advances in existing molecular imaging and role in genetics to achieve the goal of prediction, prevention, diagnostics, prognosis and management together with rehabilitation of any patient. As Dr. Dennis, Chief of the Medicine from Massachusetts General Hospital, Boston says, I quote, "In medicine, we have to change our mandate from talking only about the curing a disease to talking about how we move from wellness to disease, how we prevent the movement of illness, how we can move back to wellness column," unquote. Some of the extracts from his cover story of the next generation healthcare dealt with focusing on holistic, patient-oriented clinical process innovation based on improvement in imaging technologies and new genetic tests and knowledge based on IT solutions. The next generation healthcare deals with necessity to move medicine and radiology from episodic symptomatic care and diagnostic imaging, a reactive approach to Medicare, to pre-symptomatic continuous care with the development of a robust assessment of human phenotype and genetic details. The legendary dealt at length in his field based on 4 P's: the precision, perpetual, portable, and lastly the performance in understanding the human phenotype, which eventually helped in next generation of healthcare. As far as radiology is concerned, the innovative diagnostics for the improvement in the field of radiology, my colleagues who are experts in their own field are going to give the bird's eye view on various technology advances, thought-provoking session of this E-India Health Summit 2013. I will now call upon my colleagues to speak on the topic allotted to them. I will first call upon Dr. N. Ishwar Chandra. N. Ishwar Chandra, he is the General Secretary of the Indian Radiological and Imaging Association of Andhra Pradesh State Chapter, and also consultant radiologist at Kamineni Hospital, Hyderabad, and also a teaching faculty in the Kamineni Institute of Medical Sciences, Hyderabad, at Narketpalli, and he will be dealing with innovations in radiology. I request Ishwar Chandra to come and speak. The time allotted is about 10 to 12 minutes for you. And we'll have the discussions at the end of all the talks.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, all of you. In the next about 8 to 10 minutes, I'll be talking about, in general, about innovative diagnostics and radiology, which are improving the life of the radiologists, the medical fraternity, as well as the patients. Now, innovation per se means something new or differently introduced, or it could be something very original, very new, and important in whatever field that breaks into or obtains a foothold in a market or a society. And it could mean development of better products, better processes, improve the services, introduce new technologies, or development of new ideas. Now, there are basically 2 types of innovation. It could be manufacturer-driven innovation, what the manufacturer gives to us, or what is becoming more important of late is the end-user innovation. There's a product, how the end-user makes innovation, like in these pictures. Now, if you see the top medical innovations as detailed by the Cleveland Clinic of 2012, out of the top 10 innovations, 4 are related to radiology. And that underlines the fact that diagnostics are playing a major role in day-to-day practice of clinical medicine. The first of these is an interventional technique of 2012. This is the 2012, a catheter-based renal denervation to control resistant hypertension. The second was CT scans for early detection of lung cancer, the role of how screening CT has changed the diagnosis and early diagnosis of lung cancer in patients at increased risk. Number 4 is medical apps for mobile devices. Now, almost all of us use smartphones, and inherent to our daily practice are the apps which we use. And the number 6 is the implantable device to treat complex brain aneurysms, which are more than 2 to 2.4 centimeters. That is 2012. Coming to 2013, the 2 innovations which are there in the top 10. Number 8 is the modular device for treating complex aneurysms of the abdominal aorta. And at number 9 is breast tomosynthesis, which is increasingly coming into play into clinical practice of breast medicine to detect early cancer for screening. Now, Vis-a-vis the innovations in radiology, they could be related to hardware developments, they could be due to innovations in personal, how you utilize the personal, or how productive, more productive we become, issues related to patient safety or point of care diagnostics, how innovative we become to take these to the community or the outreach areas, innovations in workflow, how we do our daily practice in the department and how well we deliver these products to the end user, and innovations finally in radiology education. Now the innovations in hardware will be dealt with my colleagues. I'll leave it at that. One example I'd show is an ultrasound transducer which is coupled to a smartphone. This is already in place in the US. There's a smartphone and there's a small transducer which can be connected to a smartphone and it can be taken to the field or in the emergency setting, whatever it might be. Now, innovations in radiation safety. We want the current generation of CT scanners have also introduced an element of over-utilization coming with an increased risk of more radiation than simple X-rays what we were using before, or the simple single slice scanners what we were using before. So one such innovation is use of bismuth breast shields. When you are doing CT of the chest in young females, you want to protect the breast because they're very radiosensitive, and repeated scans could induce a radiation-induced malignancy in them. And this is one innovation which has been used to reduce the radiation dose to the breast. Now, innovations in staff safety are also of paramount importance, and all those working in the cath labs wear lead aprons, and which of them can be very heavy, 10 to 12 kilos, and if you're doing a long procedure, they could really break your back. And one innovation in that is the introduction of a zero gravity lead apron, which is hung from the ceiling, and the person doing the procedure will not have feel any weight of it. This is hung from the ceiling, and he can come easily out and in out of the ceiling hung lead apron. Innovations in radiation safety also mean you develop good protocols, utilizing various associations and the experts in the field. So two such very successful campaigns which have been developed and of late include the Image Gently campaign for radiation safety in pediatric imaging, and the Image Wisely campaign which deals with radiation safety in adult medical imaging. All of them are sponsored by the American College of Radiology and other leading radiology associations in the US and worldwide. Innovations in outreach, point of care technologies, where how you go into the community where you don't have sophisticated machines. So now we have systems, the ambulances, where digital X-ray facilities are in place. So this facility could go to the village or to the trauma center on the highway and be able to do radiographs and then be able to transmit them via an internet to the base so that a quick diagnosis can be made. Another very innovation in ultrasound is a ultrasound machine which looks like similar to a stethoscope developed by GE, and it's available in India, and it can be done rapidly at the bedside or at the trauma care center to rapidly diagnose internal injuries, especially in the abdomen. Now, mobile CT and MRI are not yet available in India, but they're popular in UK, where due to the long waiting list, these privately owned companies go to the hospitals, park them outside in the parking lots, the patients go there and get their scans done. Now, innovations in workflow is a very significant enhancement in delivery of radiology in healthcare. Teleradiology has made life much simpler, much easier to both the radiologists, to the clinicians, and to the patient as well. I think this will be dealt by Dr. Harsha. I'll leave it at that. Now, innovations in workflow in the radiology department, voice recognition, medical transcription, utilization of the RIS, and integrating with the HIS have significantly made a real impact. Now, handheld devices, it's, as I've said, they're ubiquitously used, and most of the images can be viewed in a handheld, be it an iPhone or an iPad or a similar Android device, and these are increasingly being approved by both the FDA and other regulatory authorities. So this is one iPhone related app which has been cleared by FDA a couple of years ago, which can see the CT and MR or other nuclear medicine images. Now, there are also innovations in how patients view their images. Now, this is the era of cloud computing where everything is stored on the cloud, and patients' images are also shared on the, they can store their images on the cloud and they can give access to whomever they want depending upon the need. And a particular source has been the image share, which has been developed by 5 major universities in the US, where patients can log in, the images can be uploaded there, and they can give passwords and authorizations to other physicians or colleagues to view their images. There have also been innovations in how you market radiology. One such thing, though it didn't really take off in our state, is the concept of timeshare. The entrepreneur doesn't own the center or doesn't own a radiology machine, but he owns the time of a particular center. So in their free time, he gets his patients there and gets the scans done. On innovations in entrepreneurship, especially the teleradiology front, there are numerous entrepreneurs in India, especially from Bangalore. This is one such entrepreneurial site, where sitting in India, you're able to report images from the US or the Europe, which was unthinkable of a couple of years back. Innovations in entrepreneurship, again, partnering with industry, partnering with government and organizations in installing radiology equipments in a private-public partnerships. Innovations in philanthropy. We have public-private partnerships as this, which is there at PGI Chandigarh. Collaborative project with Rite Aid, Philips Healthcare and PGI, where a digital mammography is installed in this machine in addition to digital radiography and ultrasound, and this goes to the community and does a mass screening program for cancer of the breast. Innovations in equipment service. Previously, if an equipment was broken, especially in the districts, it used to take quite a lot of time for the service engineer to go to the on-site, do the service, find out what's happening, and then report it back. So now most companies offer a remote diagnostics. The machine is linked via an internet to the base center in their head office, and a continuous diagnostics is made, assessment of the machine performance is made, and you could prevent failures or breakdowns using remote diagnostics. Now, innovations in expanding applications. Now, all through have been only imaging the living. Now, radiology is also going on into imaging the dead. It's probably will play a major role in imaging of the dead bodies in forensic applications. You want to look for internal hemorrhage, you want to look for fractures or inaccessible areas where everything can be detected on an autopsy. So this is going to play a role. And postmortem radiology has developed over the last decade. There are some institutes utilizing this technology, especially in Switzerland and other European countries, where MDCT or MRI are being put into use to look inside the body. So this is one example. A chest radiograph shows there's a postmortem chest radiograph after a firearm injury, showing the multiple bullet fragments embedded here. And on the right, this is axial CT section of the patient who died of sand asphyxiation. You could find the aspirated sand in the tracheobronchial tree and the result in pulmonary edema. Now, innovations in creating awareness predominantly to the patients and to the lay people. So the International Day of Radiology is being celebrated. As Dr. Abkari was saying, November 8, 1895 was the day when X-rays were discovered. And this is being celebrated from last year, from 2012, as the International Day of Radiology, to promote awareness to the people as well as a networking with all the radiologists. And 2013 has been designated as the Year of Ultrasound by the American Institute of Ultrasound and Medicine, again to integrate ultrasound education for both clinical applications and education. Now, innovations in supporting tests. Now, those of you who know that a computed tomography might require use of contrast, and that before you give contrast, you need to test the renal function. So for renal function assessment, a routine serum creatinine blood test could take 2 to 3 hours in the routine laboratory. But something you have like a glucometer-like device, where it's a strip-based device, you could do the serum creatinine at the CT scan itself, a point-of-care diagnostic again. So these are the innovations which can be there in the diagnostic setup as well. And finally, innovations in radiology education. And I think this has made a significant impact in developing programs for radiology residents. Nowadays, most radiology residents are online than they are in the real world. So you have cloud-based multimedia radiology education, which is a reality. You have websites, so many. You have webinars. You have the YouTube, the TED-Med, mobile devices which support all these devices. So that's become a reality again. So to conclude, the innovations are in multiple spheres, and you need to really think out of the box to be able to utilize the advances and make radiology a fruitful and a safe field for patients as well as the doctors. I thank all my co-panelists for having readily agreed, and finally to eHealth for having us here, and all the participants in this conference for having patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ishwar Chandra. You have given us a bird's eye view of innovations which has occurred in radiology and imaging. Now I call upon Dr. P. Lalitha to come forward and tell us about the innovations which has occurred in X-rays, mammography, ultrasound, and recent advances and development in pipeline which may become the reality in the future. Dr. P. Lalitha. Dr. P. Lalitha is our Vice President of the Indian Radiological and Imaging Association at the National Headquarters, and she is a consultant radiology at the Yashoda Hospitals, Hyderabad. Dr. Lalitha.
Thank you, sir. Well, this is something I really cannot do in 10 minutes, so I'm just going to touch upon a very few things which most of us use in our daily practice. X-ray imaging, so this was our previous X-ray systems wherein we had our films which you put them inside this box, made the patient lie down on this table, and then the technologist would take that film there, take it to the dark room, put it in different solutions and take ages to bring us a proper X-ray film. But now with the introduction of computer radiology, we have done away with the darkroom systems. Instead of a conventional film, we have something called the imaging plates which have photostimulable phosphor in them. So they catch the image, they catch the X-rays after they come out of the patient and form a latent image. And that imaging plate with the latent image will be put into an image reader, and then you can directly see the image on a computer system. Now, these were the original films that initially people used to use and then take to the dark room and develop it. But then we have these present imaging plates which are used in the CR system. Now, CR system has now given way to the digital radiography, wherein you have a direct digital imaging plates which are kept beneath the patient, which catch the X-ray beam that is coming out of the patient and form an electronic image which can easily be read out on our systems. So you have the direct radiography, wherein you have these photoconductors which capture the X-rays after it comes out of the patient and then form a latent image. And then you have this indirect system too, which has an intensifying screen which has those photostimulable phosphor. So you have a latent image that is formed in the form of a light, which is later again converted into an electric form of that image, and that's how your final image would look like. And these digital images are, they look much more good, the edges are much more sharper, you can pick up lesions very well, and the most important thing is you can do away with a lot of technical errors, like your technician putting wrong factors, using wrong MA, wrong KV. You can just do away with all those errors, and you can do a lot of post-processing. You want the image to look bright, you can do it. You want it to look dark, you can do it. You want to magnify a certain area, you can do it. So digital radiography has really made life very easy for us and for the patients too. Coming to the ultrasound, one important thing that we normally use in a clinical practice is tissue harmonic imaging. It's a technology wherein whatever ultrasound is coming back from the patient, initially we used to use that entire ultrasound to form the image. But now with the introduction of tissue harmonic imaging, we only use the second harmonic to form the image. Now why do we do that? That's because look at this image wherein you're not really sure what you're seeing in this area, but then the moment you switch on your tissue harmonics, the area becomes much more clearer. So we use this technology because lesions are much more clearer and better defined. And it would help us to differentiate cysts from solid masses, especially when they're very small, a millimeter or a couple of millimeters, especially in superficial structures like the breast tissues. And it is definitely superior to conventional ultrasound and is much more useful in obese patients. So that's why whenever we see any difficult area, we always go into our tissue harmonic mode and say it. 3D imaging, 4D imaging, extensively used in obstetrics. It has a lot of other applications also, but I think it's become more popular and famous in the obstetric imaging. So you have this 2D image wherein you can see only two-dimensional, but the moment you switch on your 3D and you use your special volumetric probes, these volumetric probes bombard the tissue with ultrasound from various directions and then capture the returning echoes from various directions and finally give you a 3-dimensional image like this. So 3-dimensional image is one thing that doesn't have the let us say the movement aspect of it. So when you add movement to this 3D, it becomes a 4D. And see how happy the patient would become the moment they see a normal baby. But what's in it for us? How does it make life easier for me? See, I can pick up very small lesions very well. Suppose a child is a small cleft lip, I probably would not have been able to see it on the 2D, but then I would easily pick it up on this photographic kind of an image, and that's how 4D, other than being an entertainment ultrasound, that's what they call it. But then it's also useful for diagnosis. It saves a lot of time. And then we have something called this advanced automated ultrasound fusion imaging. We have MR, we have CT, we have ultrasound. They're all separate. But then you have the system wherein you can superimpose a previously done MR or a previously done CT on an ultrasound image. How is it useful for us? See, suppose this was a lesion here, an area of abnormality, I want to biopsy this, but I don't want to do it under CT guidance because of the radiation, I want to do it under ultrasound guidance. So I can just superimpose a previously done CT on this ultrasound screen, and then I can be very, very sure that the area where I'm putting my needle on an ultrasound is the same as the area where the abnormality was there on the CT scan. Look at this small lesion on the MR. MR is excellent for picking up the lesions, but then sometimes it could be a problem in characterizing the lesion. So you exactly want to know if it's fluid filled, is it solid, what kind it is. Then you can superimpose that MR image on the ultrasound image, and you can make sure the lesion that you're seeing here on the ultrasound is the very same lesion that you wanted to characterize on the MR. And then this specific appearance of being echogenic on the ultrasound stamps this lesion to be a hemangioma and absolutely nothing else. So MR was excellent for localization, and ultrasound helped you in characterizing the lesion, and because you used the fusion imaging, you were very sure that it was the same lesion on MR that you had seen on your ultrasound. Elastography, again, something that everybody is doing now, everybody is talking about now. You have, this is a unique mechanism or some kind of a new technique which gives you information about the stiffness of a tissue. This kind of information is not given by any other imaging modality that we have till now. It's color coded, or you can also quantify it by using strain ratios. You can just compress the tissue, or you can use some shear waves to compress the tissue and then see how the tissue is responding to pressure. See, suppose it's green to tell you that this lesion is soft. So most malignancies are very hard and very stiff. So if this lesion is soft, it's okay. I'll wait, I will follow it up, maybe do a scan after 6 months. I need not go right ahead and biopsy it. But suppose I see a lesion like this, and then that lesion is completely blue, it's very hard, so there's more chance of malignancy. So that gives you a sense of urgency. Go right ahead and biopsy it. It is also being used extensively in the liver to diagnose the pre-cirrhotic stages. HIFO, this is a real boon to women with fibroids who don't want to go under the knife. It's a highly precise medical procedure that applies highly intense focused ultrasound energy to destroy certain tissue. Now, what the ultrasound that we use in diagnostic imaging is of a very low intensity. But then if you want to burn a tissue up, you want to kill a tissue up, you'll have to use very highly focused ultrasound, which is going to increase the temperatures in that area, but the beam is focused to around 65 to 85 degrees centigrade, and it's but obvious the cell is going to die. It's just going to undergo coagulative necrosis and die. So that's how you can do a kind of a surgery without actually cutting the skin. So you can do it under MR guidance, which is approved in India and Asia. Ultrasound guidance, well, it's not yet approved in our country, so we are doing it under an MR guidance, so that's how you do it. You use your MR to actually localize the area. You have to send your focused ultrasound only to that area, not to any of the surrounding area, and kill only that tissue. So this was the MR of a lady who underwent this HIFO for a fibroid. Look at that fibroid, pre-treatment, nice solid enhancing lesion. If you use contrast post-treatment, you can see this area of black, not enhancing, that's the dead tissue. So almost 90% of her fibroid was cured, and she was symptom-free simply because she had a 1 hour of HIFO treatment in the MR without any surgery. Mammography, so this was a conventional mammographic machine. So these are normal views wherein we take the oblique views and then we take the craniocaudal views. Okay, that was very good. But then look at this dense breast. Probably that's a very young lady. That was a lactating lady. We don't know. She has a malignancy hidden somewhere there. We can't see it because the tissue is so white. So it's just hiding it. So that's how digital mammography has also helped us. Just like how we have digital imaging for routine chest, etc. You can also do it for the mammograms and then see how things have cleared up. You can see better. And like I said, the most important thing about this digital radiography is the post-processing. You can really alter the image, you can magnify the image, and you can do all kinds of post-processing which will make diagnosis much, much more easier for you. And then we have something on the contrast enhanced digital mammography, a very young lady, dense breast, there is some asymmetry. Look, it's normal here, it's abnormal here. Now what do we do with this? Should we just go in and biopsy it, or can we do something non-invasively? So we have done this contrast enhanced digital mammography, and look at the final subtraction images after injecting contrast. Only the area of malignancy stands out. Not only does that area stand out, you have a satellite nodule here, and then another satellite nodule here which you picked up. So without touching the patient with a needle or a knife, you're 100% sure that she has a malignancy, and then you can plan for further treatment. Another lady, there was this lesion here. Again, we're not really sure, is it malignant, is it benign? You really can't approach that. The size of the breast is also large, and then there's so much of breast tissue. It's very difficult to localize a small needle, the small lesion with a needle. So what did we do in that? We went ahead and did this contrast study, and then you can see that there is absolutely no enhancement. So you can send this patient home saying you do not have a malignancy. Please come back for a regular mammographic examination after 1 year. 3D mammography, the tomosynthesis we were talking about, like I said, our routine mammography is only a two-dimensional image. Everything is superimposed on everything. So you have a malignancy sitting right behind this area of dense glandularity, you can't pick it up. But then you have this 3D mammogram wherein this, the tube rotates all around the patient and captures images from all directions. You can just slice away the breast tissue, 1 mm, 2 mm, and then you can see it slice by slice, and there's no way you're going to miss anything on that. Finally, we have this cone beam breast CT scanner. Till now, we really didn't use CT for the breast because so much of radiation dose, and it's a sensitive organ. But then you have this dedicated cone beam breast CT scanner just for the breast, and that's how the patient would lie down. And then once this breast is scanned, no other part of the body gets irradiated. The chest wall doesn't get it, the lungs don't get it, the heart doesn't get it. Only the area that you want to image gets the radiation, and then you can really pick up lesions very well. So this was a lady, she had this lesion here. Again, we were not sure what it was in the mammogram. She underwent a dedicated breast CT in the cone beam CT. This was a pre-contrast and post-contrast. You can see this entire area of malignancy lighting up. So that's how good it is. So finally, to summarize, a lot of rapidly advancing technological improvements are there, but how does the clinician know? I'm a radiologist, so I'll look it up. It's my bread and butter, but how would the clinician know? So you have to have an interaction between the clinician and the radiologist. If they have a doubt, they can always call us up and say, would you suggest an ultrasound for this patient? Would you suggest an MR? And we'll be more than happy to help them out and tell them which is the best modality, because the primary goal of both them and us is to make the imaging and treatment tailor-made to suit the patient, both his disease and his financial status. Thank you very much.
Nicely, the innovations occurring in the X-rays, digital radiography, both computerized and direct, and also in breast imaging. And now we'll go on to the another speaker, Dr. Pawar, Ravi Pawar, to come and speak on innovations in CT, MR and interventions. Dr. Pawar is the treasurer of the Indian Radiological and Imaging Association, Andhra Pradesh State Chapter, and also he is the consultant radiologist at the Care Group of Hospital, Nampally, Hyderabad. Dr. Pawar.
Good evening, all of you. At the outset, I thank E-India and my friend Ishwar for giving this opportunity to be here. I'm just going to, because there are two modalities which I'm going to deal with. One is CT and MR, and I just give a brief outline of both the modalities, what are the innovations have taken place in the recent past. interventions in the cardiovascular disease, and second is in radiology. In radiology, basically the MRI, the magnetic resonance imaging, and in CT. So there are two most important innovations which we have in the last 25 years. The ranking of all the 30 medical innovations, if you see all these, to start with, first is MR and CT, then we have ACE inhibitors, then balloon angioplasty, statins, mammography, coronary artery bypass graft, proton pump inhibitors and H2 blockers, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and new non-SSRIs, cataract extraction and lens implantation, hip and knee replacements, and lastly ultrasound and echocardiography. Though it is not very common in India, we see in Western world, this is a very common thing, that this is the most important thing, because the machines going to the patient's doorstep. That's what the innovation is needed today. We have mobile CTs and MRs abroad, especially in the UK, and where the patients can get scanned in their own area so that they can reach to without coming to the major healthcare centers. That's a major innovation. And to start with MR, as all of us know, we start with permanent magnets, resistor magnets, and per-supercon magnets. And in supercons, the most important and commonly used today in clinical practice is 3T magnet, where we get very good information. As we know, MR is non-invasive, no radiation, multiplanar, and highly tissue sensitive. So it gives very good information to know various tiny lesions in the whole body. And apart from that, we know that MR gives a lot of noise inside because of gradients during the scan. Though of late we have silent MRs, where the noise level is very minimal inside the magnet room, and also the ambience, because it's a long tunnel, because when patient goes inside the tunnel, he feels claustrophobic. To prevent that, we have small length magnets. Also, we have wide bore magnets. So all the latest innovations where the patient's comfort is very important, and even the magnet room itself will be very pleasing for the patient to sit inside. Especially if you go for orthopedic imaging, there is an area where patient already has some pain in the joints. He can't able to lie down or continuously stay inside the magnet for a longer time. Now we have the magnets which suit the patient's position. That means if you are doing an imaging of the knee joint, you can have in flexion position, and various chairs kind of things are there. The magnets are made in these ways so that comfort level is increased. So we have all sorts of innovations where the patient comfort is the priority in these cases. The newer MR applications are the MR spectroscopy, FMR, we have MR angiographies, diffusion and perfusion, where basically when you want to study the tumors and infarcts, this very good modality or software. We have interventional and intraoperative MR. It is very common now. Intraoperative MR, though in India it is not practiced, in Western world it is very common, where inside the OT itself we have an MR where patient can be shifted into the MR during the surgery, and they can do scan, and the surgeon will know what's happening and how far the lesion has been removed. And we have the cardiac MR is very informative, the myocardial viability, everything can be seen in MR, and various body applications from head to toe we can do, and kinematic applications are the order of the day. MR perfusion, again, basically what we do is here, we try to see the area which is more perfused or less perfused. This is how we had to use contrast here, and we use generally rapid T2 weighted EPI sequence, which runs for about 60 to 90 seconds, where the multiple measurements of the gadolinium inside the area of interest is taken, and we can assess the area of interest. What are the various clinical applications? Mostly it is used in the stroke imaging and the imaging of the brain tumors, and any mismatch between the perfusion and DWI sequence will tell us what is the salvageable tissue available in the brain. And also in brain tumors like gliomas and metastasis, this is very useful to know the various imaging features of these modalities. Bold imaging is very useful to map and localize the brain areas which are responsible for a particular task. This is based on blood oxygen level dependent imaging, and deoxyhemoglobin causes drop in the signal on T2 or T2 weighted star images, where it gives information which area is involved in this. ASL, this is the latest innovation in MR, where we can image the tissue bed. We can see, especially in the infarcts and tumors, we can able to target the arterial blood supply by magnetic inversion pulses, and we know what exactly which part of the tumor is more at the target area. CSF flow studies, especially in hydrocephalus, to know how the flow within the CSF spaces, and generally it is done with ECG gating, and phase contrast method is used, and this is a normal value. That's how the CSF flow analysis is being done to know the pressure in the CSF spaces. PET-MR, now all these years we have PET CTs, now the days of PET-MRs, though we don't have now right now, but abroad it is available, and few centers are coming up in the north where they are going to have a fusion of both PET and MR. It's very useful in the cardiology, oncology and neurology. And this is one of the cases where we can see in the mediastinum there is a large mass lesion, which is a PET MR. We can see the area of interest or the tumor area. And real-time MR, it has started the kinematics, and especially to evaluate the joints, we can really see how the joint ligaments and what is the movement, range of movements. And we also can see the speaking and swallowing, and we can have 3D images of this. And high-field MRs are the order of the day. Now we have, most of the places we have 3Ts, which give very good information, especially in FMR, that is the area functional MR, where we can evaluate the area of interest, especially in epilepsy surgeries. This is very important to know the eloquent areas. So we have the advantage of high-field magnets. And there are the few examples to show the DWI, how it helps to show, though the routine spin echo image may be normal, but DWI picks up the area of interest, that means which is infarcted. Similarly, angiography to know the various sinuses, major venous sinuses which are blocked or patent, to know accurately. And MR spectroscopy to see the various peaks. Choline, this is a case of tumor where you can see the choline peak is grossly elevated to say it is a tumor. And MR neurography, because we can see the nerves very clearly, brachial plexus or sciatic nerve, everything we can see nicely. Is a case of MR neurography showing a sciatic nerve schwannoma. Now MR, it's not just single part. We can do the whole body MR from head to toe. We can study it as like a whole body imaging of the MR. It's like in metastatic disease or in myeloma, to know the whole body, we can do MR this way. And kinematic imaging, yes, to study the various joints and ligaments and how the movements, the range of movements, everything can be done with MR. Coming to CT, the newer applications what we have in CT are volume rendering techniques, especially using 3D, and CT angiography. We can do the almost from single run, we can do from chest up to the dorsalis petralis level. And virtual CT, we can fly through the colon, or we can fly through the upper GI tract to know exactly various abnormalities in these areas, and cardiovascular perfusion. So that's how the conventional CT used to look. And today, with the advent of MD CTs, everything is colorful. We know everything in detail. We can precisely localize the lesion, and it's very useful both for the clinician and the radiologist. And in case of cortical aorta, post-stenting, we can see the all VIT image. It nicely depicts. It increases the surgeon's confidence level to know what exactly is happening and how to deal with the case. Similarly, a mass in a small neonate, we can see everything 3D. Volume technique, we can color code the areas, and we can delete, we can subtract the bones, we can see soft tissues or vessels. Similarly here, we can see the bones and other parts of the body. And to know the function, physiology, anatomy, everything we can use, and that is the status of CT today. And this is just a model to show the metastasis in the liver of a mouse to how clearly it can depict, and various vessels in the brain of a rat brain. We can see all the vessels so nicely with multi-directed CTs. CT perfusion, it really helps to know the area of cell death. So nicely we can predict. And there are various clinical applications of the CT perfusion, especially it is useful in the acute strokes and in the tumors. And then an example to show the CT perfusion. And dual energy CT is very useful to see the various densities in the body, especially, so one example, we can see the various clinical applications we have in the heart, liver, renal masses, renal calculi. We can know what kind of calculi the patient has by color coding, and also adenomas. A case of gout, we can see multiple tophi, which can be very well depicted with this one, dual energy CT. So luminal studies, we can see the fly through the various parts of the GIT. This is a case, we can see the, with 3D, we can fly through the whole colon, and it's almost like a colonoscopy what the clinician does. So virtual bronchoscopy, we can see the whole, the trachea, carina, bronchi, and their divisions. Everything can be seen. And mostly the important thing is low dose CT. This is the very important nowadays because radiation is the one thing which we have to keep in mind. Low dose CTs are required to know various abnormalities without compromising on the quality. To conclude, the various innovations in the field of MR and CT have revolutionized the patient management and also help the clinicians to know various tiny lesions which are available in the various parts of the body so that management can be done accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pawar. You've done an excellent job in showing us the innovations in both CT and MRI. We'll go to the last speaker, Dr. Harsha Chadaga. He is the Senior Consultant and Head of Radiology Operations at Columbia Asia Hospital, Bangalore. And he will be speaking us on teleradiology, how it is useful.
At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for having given me this opportunity. I am the last speaker here today, and I won't take much of your time. I will be just telling you about what is teleradiology and what's happening in teleradiology, and what are the benefits that one gets with teleradiology, and what's the future. So in teleradiology, basically it means that you acquire images and then there is a transfer of the images to a remote place via the internet, basically for image interpretation. It could be within the hospital, to another center remotely, or even outside the country. Now, why this new branch? When I did my post-graduation, hardly teleradiology existed. But today, there's a lot of demand because of the following reasons. As you can see, that the number of radiologists, the annual growth rate is about only 1.5 to 2%, but the number of images or the number of scans that are being done is rapidly increasing. Also, we see that there is a limitation, that there is more and more complex technology that is coming. It's more and more demanding, and in terms of the patients, it's becoming an evidence-based practice, and so the treatment decisions are based on the imaging itself. So it becomes important to get a report at a very early rate, because if you get the diagnosis early, then the turnaround time also is much faster. So how did this necessity, why did this start at all, is because usually there were a lot of images, a lot of scans to be reported, and too few radiologists, and there were long hours of time to wait till you got your report. or sometimes it's a complex case, you don't have people in your area, so you need to get a second opinion, you don't agree, then again teleradiology would be the answer. Or if it's a hospital where there's only one radiologist and he's going on leave and you're worried about what to do when he's on leave, you can't wait for him to come back and report your scans. So again, and also if the radiologist is not doing very well and you still want you want your business to improve as an owner of a hospital, then again you could resort to teleradiology. So these are some of the things which could come to, like it is very cost effective, and this service is available around the clock, and particularly you have subspecialty reporting, and you can now, all this is possible. Why? Because of the technological advances. Now, as we have all been talking about this, to have teleradiology practice, you need to have a good infrastructure in terms of bandwidth, internet connection, and a good IT platform which is quite secure. And you also need to have support, like IT support, because any breakdown, you need to have people to help you to get it up and running. So basically it has to be safe, and it also has to be secure. Now this is exactly what I've done here, is just to show you how we are a group of hospitals like at different places in India. But we have made a virtual hub, which actually where all of us are interconnected, and so basically we are multi-location located, multiple sites we are sitting, and we have experts at different places, and we are able to cross-utilize this expertise. And we also have achieved what we typically call as 24/7 coverages at all the sites, and we are able to optimize cost. Now, what we have noticed, what has been the change in the management's outlook, is that radiologist outlook as a support to a primary specialty, to a profit center. So basically their outlook towards the radiology department itself has changed. So what are the benefits generally you come with, that comes with teleradiology, is that you can get standard reporting format. So if you go across to any of our hospitals, the reports look alike, and in terms of a group, we are now able to have specialists sitting in Palam or Patiala or different locations, and we are able to have exchanges. So any complex pediatric case, we have a pediatric radiologist sitting, or a complex neuro case, we have a neuro radiologist reporting us. And so that way it has been very successful for us. What else happens is, with teleradiology comes also quality. Now people are looking at accuracy, and so we have our own quality monitoring systems, and all this has been possible because of the strong IT infrastructure. And during our routine activities, we are also able to keep track on how much time it is taking to get our reports, the turnaround times. We are able to calculate what is the amount of work a radiologist is able to do. So financially, what has happened is, if you look, our hospitals, some of the hospitals which are fully working for the last 2 to 3 years, we have been able to bring down the cost by utilizing people from our newer hospitals where they don't have much work. So that way there's been a cost factor. And in terms of the radiologists, we are also, what advantage we have seen is, we can have more people in different locations where there's no MR. They are able to do MR reporting because of the interconnection, and there's also a lot of business opportunities with this. And we could also, because the number of scans that are being done or read, so there's huge research material which is available, and so these are some of the advantages one gets with teleradiology. Now, there has been what is the future, if you ask me, in terms of teleradiology? Already Dr. Ishwar Chandra sir has just told, that is about cloud computing, where now what advantage it brings to us is the costs are coming down, and the same patient, if he goes to a different hospital, he's also able to see the images, so there's no need to repeat a scan. And there are these thin client 3D viewers. Basically, with one 3D viewer, all of us are able to share and do the post-processing, so significant cost reduction is there. And with the good IT infrastructure, we are able to have these video conferencing and communications going on. And with the rapid proliferation of these handheld devices, we have seen that images could be read wherever you are, and initial report could be given to the clinician, and so the clinicians are also able to see the patient data immediately and treat the patient. So this way What we have noticed is in the teleradiology has, as the technology has advanced, the future isn't what it used to be. The healthcare has become a flat world. So we at Columbia Asia are able to do telemedicine, teleradiology, and also we are working on teleeducation and telemonitoring. So basically, to sum up, I would just say that it is important to have a very profound, good technology. The processes should be in place, and with the combination, if you give importance to quality, then you could actually do a great impact in terms of service to the patient. Thank you very much.
I'll request the speakers to come out of the dais. If there are any questions, I think they'll be able to discuss this for a minute or two. From the audience, please. Please.
The challenge remains diagnosis, detection of intrauterine cardiac defects before 20 weeks. Because the law doesn't permit MTP beyond 20 weeks. So what is the best modality to pick up such defects, congenital heart defects? So shall I speak out the question for next speaker as well? For Dr. Pawar?
We'll go by one.
One by one, fine.
Intrauterine fetal cardiac defects, I think echo is the modality of choice. And fetal echo, ultrasound in the hands of a very experienced radiologist who has a lot of experience in fetal echo, I think that is a modality.
What kind of echo? Doppler, 2D?
Yes, a combination of Doppler and 2D.
And
no, maybe 3D and 4D may not help because they all give you surface rendering. You
how
really
much is the yield in the hands of an experienced radiologist?
Pardon me?
How much could be the pickup rate? Even he will be missing some of the lesions before 20.
Yes,
It's a lot of subjectivity.
Yes.
Okay.
But I think in the hands of an experienced radiologist, you could have a really good pickup. It depends on the size of the lesion. If it is very, very small, then there's no way we
Because
can...
we had quite a few cases in India itself where the lesion was diagnosed post 20 weeks and people went to the court, and you all are aware that this remains a challenge in diagnosis. So.
Right. It can be difficult, definitely,
fine,
in smaller lesions.
Sir, nowadays the fetal medicine is growing up and people are subspecialized and focusing on the fetal medicine, especially fetal echo is really coming up very well, and people are taking that as a specialty and trying to focus so that they can able to deliver the goods properly.
So my request for Dr. Pawar is that in an intraoperative MRI, how do we achieve a non-ferrous atmosphere when we are using so many other surgical equipment? Secondly, do you think with the scope of radiology expanding, it's a very basic, naive kind of question, when we are able to assess the functional status of the organs, say brain, the scope of the nuclear medicine is shrinking. So do you see some of the radiological imaging investigation replacing the nuclear scanning modalities? So both the questions, like one is the use of interoperative MRI and non-ferrous situation.
Yes, the intraoperative MR, it involves a lot of money because all the surgical equipment should be MR compatible. That's the reason it's not really taking off, but still in Western world we have few centers where they are using MR compatible surgical instruments where they can do surgeries in MR suite. The second thing is what they have is the OT is next to the MR suite. So what happens is the surgeon operates, for example, he has a brain tumor, he does, and he wants to know how much is the amount of resected portion of the brain tumor. He does it and they shift the patient because adjacent area, they shift and do intraop MR. And then there itself he knows what's happening, then they can do it. But one thing is, it's highly, a lot of money is involved in that, and that's the reason it's not very well taking off in many places of the world.
I'd like to add to what Pawar has told. that in India we have got the intraoperative MR available in Kokilabin Hospital, and they have the float ceiling MR which is floated in the operating table when they are operating. Otherwise it goes to the diagnostic area where it is utilized for the diagnosis, and it is definitely useful when they are doing it some operations, especially orthopedic operations, what they are doing it, and they are using these floating MRs in Kokilabin Hospital in Bombay.
In fact, they also have.
I think FMRI, the new Fortis Medical Research Institute, and there are few, I mean, though they are numbered only, limited only, I heard they are using.
One is the cost involved, and all equipments what you require in operation theatre should be MR compatible. That's the biggest challenge.
In fact, they also have a lot of intraoperative CTs, MRs. It is very common now. And coming to the next question, that's what I shown. The whole body MR. That's how it's almost like it's replacing the nuclear medicine. Though still nuclear medicine is still being used in routine practice. Now we can study the whole DWI, differentiated imaging of the whole body. We can know any small tiny lesion can be picked up. So MR is, we can't say at this stage that it is replaced nuclear medicine, no, but it's not very far that we are going to see MR is going to replace, like colonoscopies. The numbers have come down because we do virtual CT colonoscopies. We can see tiny lesions which are seen in the colon can be seen. In bronchoscopies, all these things, almost it's competing with other modalities.
Lastly, for Dr. Chagda, my question is that sometime recently, so we heard that there's a proposal or just an idea for developing a teleradiology grid. So kind of a situation where a radiologist at his leisure can download an image and give his opinion, and then depending upon the expertise, availability of time, he can upload it back on the grid, and there's a coordination of large number of radiologists required where the expertise can be synergized. And is it happening anytime soon, or what's the status or take on that?
No, basically what I know is like groups are coming together and forming where the various subspecialties they want to group together, and they open up a portal, and basically this is still in its infancy as far as I know in our country, but I know about few of these things happening in the West where it's a free portal where people can upload, but basically it's going to take some time for people to accept. Even the teleradiology being accepted itself is a little slow in our country, but eventually we are going to go there where it's going to be patients can upload these images onto a portal or a website, and then the concerned doctor who's registered or is available can report. So there are certain portals which are opening up, but it is still in its early stages.
Thank you very much.
If there are no questions, I would like to conclude. I'm extremely happy and congratulate my all panel of speakers who have covered the topic very well. I once again bring certain experts from the legendary Dr. Dennis, the eminent physician, the chief of the medicine from Massachusetts, in explaining that what is the relation between the translation medicine and next generation healthcare. How close are we in making leaps from lab to patient care? How can we manage the vast amount of data being generated and collected in current research? Can phenotype stratification make the clinical trial more efficient and cost effective? How do cost pressures influence the innovations in healthcare? How should industry and academicians best work together to fast track the next generation healthcare? I leave it to the E-India Health Summit 2013 to formulate the various government initiatives in health and medical education. And I once again thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity on behalf of me as a moderator, and on behalf of panel of speakers, I thank one and all. Thank you very much.
With this, we come to an end of a very insightful session, though it was the last session of the day, but it was no less enriching than any other session. I would request Dr. Palle Lalita Reddy to present a memento to Dr. Anand Abkari, please. Can you please give a big hand? Now I'll request Dr. Abkari to give with the mementos to all these speakers. Dr. N. Ishwar Chandra. To Dr. Harsha C. Chadaga. Dr. Harsha C. Chadaga. Then Dr. R. Pawar. And the only lady speaker, Dr. Palle Lalita Reddy.
Only lady gave us inspiration to doing better.
Exactly. Thanks a lot for this. Thanks a lot to all the speakers. Thanks a lot to the audience for listening in quite patiently throughout the day. And now we all can assemble at the main hall for E-India Award ceremony. Thank you.